There was a time I believed being quiet could keep me safe. At Hailcrest University, silence wasn't absence, it was armor. My name sat neatly on the class list, always marked present. My assignments arrived 10 minutes before deadline, always without comment. I spoke only when called upon, and even then never loudly. I wore clothes that blended ass-gray knits, slate skirts, shoes without heels. My steps were practiced. My hair was tied back, not for neatness, but invisibility. Room 3B echoed with a different rhythm. Minji Leclerc lived like she belonged on the cover of our school brochure. Half Korean, half French, she had the kind of face that didn't need introductions. Her ponytail was always high, her eyeliner perfect, her voice carrying even through closed doors. When she laughed, it was never alone. Someone always laughed with her, eager to echo. She called me Uni the first week. I flinched every time she said it, but never corrected her. She didn't mean harm. People like Minji rarely do. Their harm comes soft, draped in lavender perfume, and compliments that feel like ownership. That semester, we both enrolled in Professor Miles' Literature and Identity course, a class built around voice, narrative, and representation. I remember the assignment clearly, an essay exploring post-colonial themes in white noise. I had stayed up late reading critical theory, piecing together how absence of language becomes its own form of resistance. Minji had printed the syllabus and forgotten it under her coffee cup. 3 days before the deadline, she sat on her bed with one leg crossed, chewing the cap of her pen. Yuna, can you glance over this paragraph? I should have said I was busy. I should have asked why she hadn't started earlier. Instead, I reached across the room and read her opening line. Colonial trauma can be identified in modern characters through their color palettes. My fingers paused on the edge of the paper. I blinked. She smiled. You're amazing at fixing words. They weren't broken. The words slipped out before I could pull them back. She didn't hear them, or pretended not to. She passed me the laptop. I sat at our shared desk, and line by line, I rewrote the piece. At first, I simply clarified structure. Then I changed the metaphors. Then I offered an angle. Consumerism as narrative dislocation. Then I wrote the final 2 paragraphs myself because she had an evening showcase to attend. Only you understand this post-structural stuff, she said, adjusting her hoops in the mirror. I'd be lost without you. By the time I closed the file, her name was still on top, not mine. I stared at it for a long while. My name didn't even appear in the footnotes. The next week, she submitted it. 2 weeks later, she received an award. It was announced in the Student Center, on a glossy poster under a spotlight photo of her holding the plaque. Outstanding essay in literary analysis, it said. She wore red. I remembered that. Everyone else wore muted shades for the winter, but she stood out, like always. I stood at the back of the auditorium during the award ceremony, not as a guest, not as a friend, just a student, uninvited, unnoticed. I took the last seat in the last row, the one behind the pillar that muffled the sound system. I could still hear her voice clearly, though. She quoted from the essay I wrote. My metaphors, my phrases, my analysis. The audience clapped. Professor Miles nodded in approval from the front row. Minji looked radiant under the lights. She didn't glance toward the back. She didn't need to. My hands curled into my sleeves. I tried to breathe through the pounding in my chest. I told myself it didn't matter. You're still here. You're still learning. But when she said the phrase, cultural silence as structured resistance, the phrase I had crafted at 2 a.m. over stale coffee and candlelight, it felt like a clean break through my chest. Later that night, she returned to the dorm with her heels in her hand and her plaque tucked under her arm. I was already at my desk, typing up notes for another class. She flopped onto her bed and held the plaque up toward the ceiling. Do you think they'll hang this in the hallway? Maybe, I said, eyes still on my screen. You really helped. I should buy you coffee. I looked at her reflection in the darkened window. She was smiling, proud, the kind of smile that didn't wonder who made it possible, the kind of pride that doesn't consider its source. You deserve it, I said. My voice was soft. You handed her your name, and she wore it like jewelry. That night, I wrote 2 pages in my journal before closing it without signing. I never put my name in that book. It felt safer that way. Like even my thoughts had to be borrowed. Her hair tie sat on the shared desk, pink velvet flecked with shimmer. She always left things there, as if the space between us was also hers. I stared at it for a long time before turning off the lamp. Outside the window, the campus fountain kept running. A single spotlight lit the award banner fluttering from the auditorium. Her name was written in bold, serif font. Mine was nowhere. I reached for my journal again, but didn't open it. Some thoughts didn't deserve the page, not yet. The camera lingers on Yuna's face, half lit by the glow of Minji's award plaque reflecting against the wall. Her expression is unreadable. Her fingers rest on the closed journal. The room is silent, except for the soft sound of Minji's slow breathing as she sleeps. The spotlight outside flickers once, then fades. Minji's plaque still hung crookedly above her bed, a slant of metal and false legacy, glinting each time sunlight filtered through our half-drawn curtains. It cast a flicker on the ceiling that moved when she breathed. I stopped looking at it after the 3rd day, but sometimes in the quiet before lectures, I caught myself listening to its presence, like it hummed louder than the girl who won it. They announced the peer vote 2 weeks later, an open nomination for the National Writers' Panel. Professor Miles stood in the lecture hall, her voice echoing off marble tiles and half-packed tote bags. The top 5 students would be nominated. The final decision? Peer vote. Anonymous! My name was read 3rd, Minji's came last. She turned to me in that moment, lip gloss shining under the fluorescence, and mouthed, "We'll both make it." I nodded. Not because I believed her, but because it was easier than holding her gaze. That week, I noticed small shifts. People who once asked for my notes now smiled past me. Study group texts no longer reached my phone. In the cafeteria, someone giggled when I walked by. Whispers, not loud, but choreographed. By the time I overheard the phrase, I already knew whose mouth it had come from. Yuna's smart, but she's not really leadership material. It was delivered casually, like a compliment's shadow. I stood in the hallway, one hand resting on the cold edge of the vending machine, as the words landed in pieces behind the pillar. Not leadership material. The phrase clung to my back like wet wool. By the next afternoon, my inbox held a single message from the student rep committee. "Thank you for participating, final selection attached." I opened the file. Minji Leclerc, 84%. Yuna Ray, 6%? There was no room for confusion. It hadn't even been close. Later that evening, I passed the tall corkboard outside the literature office. A printout of the final vote tally had been tacked on neatly. My name was there, aligned in black Arial, crossed out once with red ink. Below it, in rushed handwriting, someone had scribbled, "Collective vibes, not personal." I stood in front of that board for longer than I meant to, long enough for 2 underclassmen to walk past, glance at the sheet, and whisper behind cupped palms. I didn't flinch. My fingers rested against my coat sleeve, pressing lightly, enough to feel the pulse, steady but dulled. Minji found me in the dorm later that night, hair damp from her evening spin class, cheeks flushed with cheer. "Uni," she called, letting the syllables stretch like honey over warm bread. "We should celebrate. You got nominated too, that's huge." "You won." So did the department. They made the right call, you know? I mean, charisma matters. She winked as she threw her bag onto the bed, then paused and let her breath catch like she'd forgotten something terribly inconvenient. Oh no, the file. I think I deleted the essay draft I was working on, the one due tomorrow. I looked at her. She wasn't even trying to pretend this wasn't calculated. The corners of her lips curled upward, not in apology, but in performance. "Do you still have the structure notes you gave me, or could you help?" My fingers curled around the mug on my desk. The tea inside had gone cold. "Didn't you back it up?" She shook her head, then, laughing softly, reached for her hand sanitizer, rose-scented, glitter-infused, and dabbed it delicately across her palms. "Energy's off today. Bad tech karma. You're better at this stuff anyway." He always said that. Always with a laugh that dismissed responsibility, like it was a hat she could toss on my head. I opened a fresh document, my laptop screen reflected my face. Tired, barely flushed, eyes dull beneath a white glow. Send me your prompt again. You're the best, Uni. She leaned in, gently bumped my shoulder with hers, and then flopped onto her bed, humming an off-key tune while texting someone I would never meet. As I typed, I could hear the low shuffle of her blanket, the tapping of her manicured nails against her screen, the faint scent of that sugary hand sanitizer floating in the air like smoke. Each paragraph I wrote felt heavier than the last. I used to take pride in clarity, syntax shaped like thought, metaphors that breathed. Now every sentence was a weight on my ribs, not from complexity, from theft. I saved the document with her name. Minji_Leclerc_essay_final docx. It wasn't the first time, it wouldn't be the last. She stood behind me as I closed the file, chin resting on my shoulder, hair grazing my cheek. She looked at the screen like it was hers. You always make things prettier. I didn't reply. Later that night, while she showered, I walked to the corkboard again. The red line through my name looked brighter than before. I reached out, touched it with 2 fingers. It didn't smudge. In the dim corridor light, Yuna's reflection lingers faintly on the corkboard glass. Her name is crossed out, but her fingers stay pressed against it, unmoving. Behind her, a shadow approaches. Minji's silhouette, wrapped in a white towel, walking back toward their room. Yuna doesn't turn around. I hadn't slept in 2 days. There were outlines taped to the wall by my bed, handwritten, not printed, threaded in red ink, annotated with layers of marginalia only I could understand. My essay on Frankenstein had become a strange kind of confessional. I wrote about mirrors, about layered selves, about how the creature wasn't born monstrous, he was abandoned into it. I'd traced every line of duality, every repetition of silence in Shelley's sentences, and wove them into a thesis that felt like my own quiet scream. It was the first time I had written something completely for myself. The night before submission, the dorm room smelled like over-steeped tea and printer toner. Minji had come in late, scarf tied around her hair, lip gloss smudged at the corner. She threw her keys onto her bed and collapsed backward. "Is it ready?" she asked without looking. "Almost," my voice cracked. I hadn't noticed until she blinked up at me. "You good?" she asked, tilting her head. "You look pale." I didn't answer. I was afraid that if I spoke again, something inside would tear. She glanced at the clock. "Midnight. Want me to turn it in for you tomorrow morning? I'll be heading to the faculty building anyway." I hesitated, then nodded. "It's one errand. She won't forget. This time. She won't." The next morning, I woke to silence. No alarm, no Minji, only the soft buzz of my phone lighting up with a single notification. Hailcrest portal essay due missed. My fingers trembled around the device. I read the line once, then twice, and then my knees buckled. I dropped to the carpet, hands pressed to the floor, heartbeat echoing in my ears like I'd been plunged underwater. My eyes stared at the light pooling beneath the desk. The outlines I'd taped to the wall fluttered in the wind from the slightly open window. It looked like a paper graveyard. The door opened softly. Minji walked in holding a coffee. She paused when she saw me sitting there, legs folded beneath me, shoulders curved inward like a question mark. "Yuna?" My head turned slowly. "You didn't turn it in." She blinked. Confused, or pretending to be. "Wait, I thought you were going to do it yourself? You offered, you said you'd be on campus." "Did I?" She laughed softly, eyes darting toward her phone. "I mean, we always help each other. You usually handle stuff." I couldn't breathe. I stood, swaying slightly, and reached for the wall as if I could steady the week itself. She sipped her coffee, oblivious to the wreckage in front of her. By the end of that week, the department posted final grades. My transcript stared back at me with a quiet cruelty. LIT 403, F. One letter to erase an entire semester's effort. One lapse to collapse a scholarship. A formal email arrived 3 days later, stating the obvious in polite language. "We regret to inform you that your academic standing no longer meets the conditions of your departmental scholarship. We encourage you to reapply in the future. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I packed. Slowly, deliberately. Took my outlines down from the wall, each piece of tape pulling softly like skin. My books went into boxes, titles I had memorized, not read. The shelf above my bed emptied like a breath exhaled too deeply. Even the journal I never signed went into the bottom of my suitcase. Minji came back mid-packing. She stood at the door, arms crossed. You're leaving? For a break? For good. You don't have to be dramatic. Everyone has setbacks. Setback. The word sat in the air like smoke that wouldn't rise. I didn't reply. She leaned against the frame. Are you mad at me? I looked at her, then really looked. Her nails were freshly painted, her hair was curled at the ends. Her sweatshirt had a quote from a book she hadn't read. She stood in our room like she owned it. And I realized for the first time that she did, not by right, but by assumption. You don't get to ask that. My voice was too even. It scared even me. I took the evening train home to Daegu. The windows were fogged from the outside, the world passing in streaks of blue and gray. I clutched my coat around me like it could hold back the weight of silence. My phone buzzed once, a message from the university system confirming my withdrawal. Then, nothing. It didn't cry. Grief needs witnesses. I had none. At home, my mother didn't ask questions. She saw the shadows under my eyes and handed me soup. My father pretended I was just taking time off. I let him believe that. In my childhood room, I unfolded the scholarship letter once more. The edges were soft from where my fingers had gripped too tightly. I crumpled it and left it in the drawer. My bookshelf here had dust. My journals were untouched. I didn't write for weeks. I didn't read. I didn't dream. Some people disappear in explosions. I disappeared in silence. A soft breeze shifts the edge of a faded outline from Yuna's Frankenstein essay, half gizable in her childhood drawer. The screen fades to black as her reflection stares at her untouched bookshelf, a single unopened envelope lying quietly beside it. Her phone lights up again, unread. She doesn't look. The silence holds. The morning I cut my hair, the mirror didn't flinch. The scissors made no sound worth remembering, only the soft hiss of severed strands falling into the sink like old threads unraveling. I didn't cry. That phase had expired months ago. I tied the remaining length into a short, neat knot at the base of my neck. It no longer brushed my shoulders. It no longer reminded me of who had once called it too soft to be serious. At Seoul Institute, nothing was soft. The campus loomed like a fortress tucked into the slope of the city's older district. Gray brick, narrow windows, and halls that echoed discipline. Unlike Halecrest, there were no banners hanging from light posts, no latte-sipping undergrads perched on lawn chairs, no Minji. I stepped through the entrance hall wearing a navy coat too large for me and carrying only a single leather file. The receptionist looked up. Dame? Yuna. I paused, then lowered my voice. Registered as RYREA. The syllables tasted foreign, like a name I'd found buried in the basement of my own chest, still mine, but reclaimed. My ID badge was printed in under 10 minutes, white font on black laminate, no color, no university crest. It clipped against my collar like it belonged there. I stared at it during orientation. Every flicker of fluorescent light against the plastic edge felt like punctuation. This is where my voice starts again. Dr. Shin Hae-suk didn't need introductions. He was the quiet engine behind the nation's most respected academic journals. His critiques dissected phrases like scalpels to bone. He didn't smile when we first met. He simply reviewed my application, then nodded once. R.Y. Ray, he repeated. Your thesis proposal is unusual. He let the silence hang long enough to become a question. I didn't blink. Why this topic? Because I've seen how easy it is to steal a voice. He didn't ask for elaboration. That was the first time I saw his mouth tilt. Not quite a smile, more a recognition, approval in his dialect. My focus was linguistic fingerprinting, an analysis method that tracks an author's unique stylistic markers: syntax, rhythm, metaphor, clusters, punctuation, cadence. Every writer leaves traces, like breath on glass. By the third month, I was auditing disciplinary review sessions with graduate fellows. By the fifth, I was assisting. No one questioned my precision. I never raised my hand, I never corrected others, I simply submitted evaluations that no one rewrote. People began calling me the algorithm in a blazer. Not to my face, but often enough for it to reach me. I didn't mind. Better to be feared than forgotten. My desk was minimalist: 3 pens, 1 lamp, and a stack of journals with colored tabs marking case studies. One drawer remained locked at all times. Inside it, the crumpled scholarship letter, an unopened email printout from Hailcrest, and the only copy of my transcript. It still smelled faintly of toner and regret. One evening, when the institute halls were quiet and winter had begun to bite through the windows, I sat under the reading lamp and stared at the paper. Hailcrest University. A GPA 2.9. Academic probation confirmed. Scholarship terminated. I folded it once, then fed it into the shredder beside the printer. The sound was clean, final. A small moment. A large exhale. By spring, Dr. Shin offered me something unexpected. A blind peer review rotation. A joint ethics program between Seoul Institute and Hailcrest's English department. It was designed to test objectivity, integrity, and system protocols. Reviewers were not told whose essays they received. No names, only ID numbers. "You're precise," he said. "That makes you useful." I accepted before he finished speaking. In my room that night, I reached for my fountain pen, the one I'd bought in place of the gold one Minji used to twirl absent-mindedly. This one wrote in black ink. It bled slowly, deliberately. No flair, just permanence. I signed my evaluation login script so tight it looked printed. Days later, the folder arrived. Digitally sealed, faculty stamped, the files were encrypted, shuffled to prevent reviewer bias. I opened the database. 12 essays, randomly assigned. The 5th one stopped my breath. Student ID 2148 LCR. Title: Gendered Memory in 20th Century Mythmaking. The cursor hovered over the file icon. The code meant nothing to anyone else. To me, it was a lock clicking open. My pulse began to thrum. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I reached for my pen, uncapped it, and drew a single black line across the back of my hand. A reminder. You're not her anymore. The screen fades in on the essay icon, still unopened on Yuna's laptop. Her fingers rest above the trackpad, unmoving, eyes locked in quiet tension. Across her desk, the fountain pen lies uncapped. The ink pools on a blank sheet like a wound slowly blooming. Her reflection stares back from the laptop screen. Sharp, still, remade. The file sat unopened on my screen, its title innocuous. Gendered Memory in 20th Century Mythmaking. Neutral, academic, intentional. I leaned back slightly, watching the blinking cursor hover over it like it too knew what waited inside. The room was silent, save for the slow hum of the air vent above. My pen lay on the desk, its nib still wet from earlier, the ink starting to feather into the paper below. This can't be what I think it is. I opened the file. A single paragraph in, I knew. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. The betrayal wasn't new, it had simply evolved. Line by line, I watched my own voice scroll across the screen under another name. She hadn't stolen the entire thing, that would have been too crude. No, this was something more meticulous. Phrases shuffled, metaphors diluted, structure softened, but the spine, still mine. I knew the rhythm of those sentences the way some people know a childhood lullaby. Third paragraph, left margin. The act of remembering becomes politicized through gendered archetypes. My fingers froze. That line had never been published, never submitted. It lived only in my draft folder, saved to a private drive under a timestamp I had never shared. Minji had always been clever. careless in action, but clever in survival. I closed the document, sat still, then reopened it beside my own. 2 tabs now, hers on the left, mine on the right, like looking at your own face through a cracked mirror. Familiar, distorted, infuriating. I watched the words blur slightly from the pressure in my eyes. You told yourself she wouldn't do it again, that people outgrow their games. I had been wrong. The room felt colder now. I pulled my sleeves over my hands and opened the system's plagiarism review log. The timer at the bottom corner began to count. Automated timestamp monitoring for evaluation sessions. My eyes traced the documents again, but not for uncertainty. This wasn't a decision made out of anger. It was precision. It was structure. With mine. Her voice echoed through memory, a whisper from 2 dorm winters ago. Everyone borrows, nobody remembers who said it first. She'd said it while brushing her hair in front of the mirror, wearing my metaphors on her tongue like lipstick. You were wrong, Minji. I remember everything. I hovered over the comment box. The cursor blinked, waiting, empty. My hands didn't tremble this time. They hadn't trembled in months. I typed. This submission mirrors an unreleased 2021 thesis draft archived under restricted records. Linguistic fingerprinting, metaphor clusters, and thesis structure match within 92.4%. Evaluation outcome, plagiarized. Then I added the final line without breathing. Submission flagged for formal review. I clicked submit. There was no satisfaction, no sting of vengeance warming the throat, only stillness. A kind of stillness that felt earned. I leaned back and let the chair carry my weight for the first time all week. Above me, the ceiling fan creaked in slow, even circles. Across the desk, the fountain pen stopped bleeding. The 2 tabs remained open. Her version still tried to speak louder, but I'd already silenced it. I let the files sit there, didn't close them. Instead, I opened my archive panel, filtered by year, then by dorm ID. Room 3B. The system brought up a floor plan, a housing log, and an archived message from the year I left Halecrest. A request filed for shared storage access. Her name beside mine. That room had taught me many things. How to make myself smaller. How to give without asking. How to disappear. And now, how to return, invisibly, and erase her in the very language she stole. Outside the Institute's window, the moon had begun its slow climb. I watched its reflection ripple across the curved glass of the study room. My breath fogged slightly against the cold. I pressed my fingers to the glass and traced a circle. A reminder, beginnings are not announcements, they are decisions. Behind me, the system let out a soft chime. Submission logged, review queued, no further action required. I shut the laptop, packed my pen, stood slowly, and walked out without looking back. The screen lingers on the 2 open tabs, Yuna's original draft and Minji's altered essay, facing each other like mismatched twins. A small red flag icon now glows beside Minji's submission. The camera pans slowly to the dimly lit hallway outside the study room, where Yuna's silhouette moves down the corridor, her steps quiet, her shadow tall. The word hovered on the screen like it had always been there. Plagiarized. A single line of truth carved through silence, through systems padded by performance and charm. It didn't shout, it didn't bleed, it simply existed, sharp, still, absolute. The cursor blinked beneath it. Evaluation outcome, plagiarized. Submission flagged for formal review. I didn't reread what I'd written. My hand remained on the mouse, steady, no tremor, no hesitation. The submit button glowed in its soft yellow hue, awaiting confirmation. I watched it pulse once, like a heartbeat. Then I clicked. The system processed the action without fanfare. No pop-up, no applause. A muted chime indicated completion. And that was it. A year of exile. A transcript reduced to numbers. My words handed out like party favors. All of it compressed into the moment a system agreed with me, quietly. I closed the laptop, not with force, with finality. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't email Dr. Shin. I didn't whisper in the back of the analysis seminar. I didn't glance at the student lounge where new names might already be buzzing with questions. I simply placed the pen back in its case. There was no checklist for revenge. A thrill. I didn't need it to feel good, I only needed it to be done. That night, I walked through the Institute's eastern garden, where the camellia trees bloomed unevenly too early for the season. Their petals spread over the gravel like someone had spilled rouge on salt. I moved through the courtyard with my hands in my coat pockets, my ID badge tucked away. A soft wind picked at the collar of my blazer. The world didn't know yet. The world didn't need to. Let her feel it the way I had. Alone. Delayed. Unexpected. By morning, the protocol had been triggered. Seoul Institute worked like an artery. One touch sent blood moving everywhere. The Halacrest portal synced its review flags at 6:00 a.m. system time. I imagined the moment the notification hit their academic committee's dashboard. A red icon beside her name. A timestamp. An attached report with embedded metadata. A footnote with my initials, R.Y. Ray. And that's all they would know. Not Yuna, not Room 3B, not the girl who once wrote an award-winning essay while someone else took the stage. Only the evaluator, only the voice. I brewed tea that morning. Earl Grey. No sugar. Steam rose from the ceramic cup, tracing ghosts into the air above my desk. The sun had just cracked the horizon, an ivory slit behind gray clouds. The world looked like paper waiting to be written on. My phone buzzed once. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I pulled a new document onto my screen. A fresh analysis, a new case, unrelated. I began reading, eyes scanning, absorbing, working. Somewhere, Minji would be waking up to a subject line she couldn't spend. The day moved slowly, like a clock unsure of its own rhythm. In the hallway, I heard two staff members whisper by the coffee machine. One of the submissions got flagged. Academic fraud, apparently, from Halecrest. Their voices dipped, then trailed off. Not because of shame, but habit. People didn't like naming things too loudly. They feared turning them real. I passed them without pause. They didn't notice me. And that, too, was justice. That evening, I opened my locked drawer. Inside, the copy of my Halecrest transcript had been replaced with newer things. My Seoul Institute commendation letter, a printed copy of my thesis proposal, approval, and a single post-it with a quote I'd written in the corner of a library book years ago. Some thefts don't take things, they take silence. I folded it once, pressed it flat beneath the stack. Minji hadn't taken my future. She had taken my voice. And now I had reclaimed it, without needing to shout. Outside, the sky turned the color of cooled steel. I watched the city lights flicker on one by one through the institute window. Across the room, my pen sat beside the laptop, ink tip facing north. I imagined her face. Not in rage. Not in tears. Confusion. The kind of confusion that breaks open doubt. Did she know? Could she guess? Would she try to write her way out of this? My lips parted once. I almost laughed. Let her write. I would know every word. A faculty inbox at Halecrest glows red with a flag submission. The screen splits. Minji's name beside a yellow exclamation mark, and a silent office at Seoul Institute where Yuna stares at her tea cooling beside her untouched phone. She looks up at the ceiling, then back down, her face unreadable. A message notification appears, but she doesn't check it. The rain came soft that morning, feathering the sidewalks like regret that couldn't speak above a whisper. Seoul's air held the quiet scent of iron and damp pavement, sharp, metallic, lingering. I zipped my raincoat over the gray hoodie I hadn't worn since Dago. The Halecrest crest was still embroidered on the left chest, faded now, its threadwork dulled to near invisibility. It used to feel like failure. Today, it felt like costume. At the visitor checkpoint, I handed over my ID. Name? Are you ready? I said, pulling the laminated badge from my bag. The guard scanned it without question. A light blinked green. Welcome, Consultant Ray. Ethics wing is down the hall, left of the faculty elevator. I nodded once. My boots echoed across the marble floor like I'd never been here before, and in a way, I hadn't. The building had changed. Or I had. Hellcrest didn't smell like I remembered. The coffee carts were still there, still serving burnt hazelnut lattes to first years who thought caffeine was courage. The bulletin boards still hung unevenly by the student commons, but the voices were thinner, quieter. A group of literature students passed by, jackets pulled close to their bodies, whispering in tones they thought no one could decode. Did you hear what happened to Minji Leclerc? The award committee pulled her file, retroactively. She's on probation now. It's kind of unreal. She always seemed untouchable. Their steps quickened as they turned the corner, coats swishing against tiled floors. I didn't look at them. Minji's name floated like steam, still visible, still warm. Soon, it would vanish entirely. The ethics committee meeting was uneventful. That's how accountability tends to look in institutions. Documents reviewed, signatures exchanged, boxes checked. My presence wasn't needed to testify. The digital trail spoke for me. All I had to do was verify and observe. Across the table, one of the assistant deans adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Your analysis was meticulous, efficient. His gaze didn't quite meet mine. Thank you, I replied. That was the point. Afterward, I walked the halls alone. There was something unsettling about how familiar it all remained. The lockers still bore the same dents, the paint still chipped in the corners near room 2C, the windows still rattled when the wind picked up. But something had shifted. The building no longer recognized me, and I didn't ask it to. The dormitory corridor was dimmer than I remembered. The overhead light flickered with a mechanical hum, casting fractured shadows across the wall. The floor still creaked near the water dispenser. I stood in front of room 3B without knocking. The nameplate had changed. Jae-in Kyung. Park Min-ha. Still new names, 2 new girls, probably arguing over who left the window cracked or which playlist to use while folding laundry. I stared at the door. The wood grain looked darker in this light. And then I said it. Not loudly, not for anyone else to hear. Nothing here belongs to me anymore. My voice didn't shake. I turned. Rain smeared the glass in the dorm lobby, streaking the world outside into impressionist brushstrokes. I stood by the vending machine, remembering the first time I'd heard Minji say the word vibes. Remembering how one sentence buried me. Now she was the one choking on silence. The university had revoked her archived award. Her graduate school recommendation had been formally withdrawn. And the Hailcrest system had flagged her academic record with a red asterisk indicating plagiarism under review for potential escalation. She was no longer adored. She was now archived. As I stepped outside, the drizzle clung to the edges of my coat, darkening the fabric. I pulled the hood over my head. Somewhere behind me, a dorm window creaked open. A soft voice murmured, too far to hear clearly. It didn't matter. I kept walking. On the shuttle back to the city line, I sat by the window. The badge on my coat read, External Ethics Consultant Ray Y. Ray. My reflection in the glass was calm. Not triumphant, not satisfied. Complete? There was no music in the bus. Only the engine hum and the rhythmic splash of tires on rain-slick streets. Minji might never know it was me, and I didn't need her to. The camera pans behind Yuna as she exits Hailcrest's main gate. Her raincoat flutters in the wind and the hood casts a soft shadow over her profile. She pauses once, only once, to look back. The building is half lit. Her old dorm window reflects nothing. Her badge catches the streetlight before she slips into the shuttle and disappears behind the glass. Dr. Shin didn't knock before entering. He never did. His presence always arrived a second before his voice, carried on the scent of old ink and winter starch. He stood at the threshold of my study alcove in the east wing of Seoul Institute, holding an envelope. Cream-colored, thin, handwritten. My name wasn't on it. He placed it on my desk beside my tea, then stepped back. It came through departmental mail, forwarded from Halecrest. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary. Do you want to talk about it? No. He nodded once, like he already expected that answer, then turned and left, coat collar brushing the frame as he disappeared down the hall. The envelope sat quietly. It had waited. Outside, the wind pulled at the trees across the courtyard, tossing the camellias sideways in a hush of green and white. My window was fogged around the edges. The world beyond it looked like watercolor, blurry, distant, soft around the lines. I reached for the envelope. The handwriting on the flap was unmistakable, that peculiar tilt Minji always had when she didn't try too hard to impress. Slightly rushed, overconfident. I didn't open it right away. My fingers hovered over the seal. The cup of tea beside me was still warm. I hadn't touched it since steeping it that morning. Earl Grey again. Familiar, bitter. When I finally slid the envelope open, a single folded sheet slipped out. No greeting, no apology, only one sentence. Was it you? There was no signature, she didn't need one. Her question wasn't about truth. It was about denial. I stared at the page, its creases forming perfect quadrants across the smooth texture. My hand grazed the ink like I was confirming it was real, as if it might disappear the way memories do. Sharp at first, then untraceable. I didn't cry. There was nothing left in me for mourning. This wasn't a wound, it was the scar. I folded the letter again. Once, then twice. I didn't shred it. I didn't respond. I didn't fantasize about what she looked like when she wrote it, or whether her hands shook, or whether her voice cracked. None of that mattered anymore. I opened the drawer on the far left of my desk. Inside were three things: my original thesis outline, the official institute seal for academic fraud review, and a label I had designed for my next project proposal. Narrative Theft in Elite Academia, a case study on uncredited voice appropriation. I placed the folded letter behind the file. Locked the drawer. Slid the key into my palm and held it there for a beat longer than necessary, then let it go. Later that evening, I passed Dr. Shin in the corridor outside the elevator. He nodded again, his version of acknowledgement. As the elevator doors slid closed, he said without turning, "You've set a precedent." I didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because silence in the right hands becomes declaration. My steps took me to the rooftop garden before curfew, where the sky burned a dusky plum above the steel ledge of the city. I sat on the stone bench that overlooked the eastern tower and watched students drift beneath the floodlights like anonymous constellations. I remembered room 3B then. Not the betrayal. Not even Minji. I remembered the silence, the way I used to sit by the cracked window, rereading my own notes as her voice echoed in the hallway outside, laughing, performing, always surrounded. She had won for a while. I had endured longer. That was the difference. People like Minji shine fast, burn bright, and fade under scrutiny. People like me were made of structure. We outlasted. When I returned to my study, the tea was cold. At least warm it again. Instead, I sat down and opened a new document. The cursor blinked once, and then again, and I began typing. There are voices that don't raise themselves. They fold into other people's sentences, only to be pulled back later, sharper, colder, unbreakable. The camera pulls back from Yuna's study window. The tea remains untouched. Her drawer stays locked. On the screen in front of her, words begin to populate a blank document. Clean, sharp lines against white space. The letter from Minji is gone, unseen now. Outside, the city continues without knowing what she did. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. She won't know it was me. That's the point.